Fantastic. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me and spending your lunch break with us. My name's Heather Gray, I'm from Bruntwood Works, and I hope you're all doing really well today and that you've come back from bank holiday weekend feeling really well rested. Over the weekend, obviously the government confirmed that the roadmap out of lockdown was all looking to go ahead with the planned timescales. So I think that was a massive relief. I don't know about you, but I've been really looking forward to enjoying food and drink that I've not cooked myself and socialising with friends and having a bit more freedom to travel. And it's a sign that the world is getting back to normal. So that's all great, right? Well, it is, but also after a year of quite intense restrictions, whilst it is lovely to see light at the end of it, if that shift to normality is making you feel a bit anxious, you're absolutely not alone. I think now that the end is in sight, it might feel a little bit like we're crawling towards the finish line. And I, for one, have had a lot of conversations this week with friends and with colleagues who are all feeling quite burnt out and maybe aren't as emotionally resilient or prepared for such a big lifestyle change, which we know is coming, even though they're super excited about it and really want it. So we've been speaking to a lot of our customers at the moment about planning their own return to the office within the next few months. And the topic of mental health during this transition is coming up a lot, which is why I'm really, really pleased to welcome Runa Uddin from Mind to today's webinar. So we'll be coming out of this power hour with some top tips, some action points around managing your own mental health, and also how do you help support your team with that too. It'll be a really, really good hour and well spent, I promise. So before we dive in, for those of you who are wondering who are Bruntwood Works, what is the Spark programme, why are you hosting this, I'll cover that super quick. As I mentioned before, my name's Heather Gray. I'm the Business Development Manager over at Bruntwood Works, and we are a property company. We make incredible offices, we make incredible retail space, incredible leisure space all across the north. But it's not just about building beautiful buildings, it's about filling them with amazing businesses too. And something that we like to think that we're really good at is creating a really strong community where everyone can thrive. Now, we've been running our business support programme Spark for a year now, which I can't believe. We've got webinars, we've got workshops, we've got advisory sessions, peer groups, like literally every way that you might like to learn, we've got it covered. Everything from personal development through to operations, through to strategy. So have a look at bruntwood.co.uk/spark and see what we've got coming up. We're going to be announcing May's calendar in the next few weeks, and the focus, because we've been planning it really in depth this week, has been about us being released back into the wild. So all of your kind of personal skills, your social skills, your career development, managing that with teams, it will be amazing. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. Now, we will be saving some time for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So please do make sure that you pop any questions into the chat box just as they come into your head. And we'll either answer as we go or we'll come to them at the end. But just make sure if you can that you're popping them in that chat box for us. So Runa, over to you.
Thanks, Heather. And hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. You know, I'm really glad that people are actually talking about the mental health, because let's face it, it has been impacting on us in every way. And the pandemic has really put like mental health on the map. Now, I'm just trying to see if I can share my screen, because for some unknown reason it's gone off. Yay! And we are back. So basically, who am I? I work for Mind. I'm the training and consultancy manager, and I've been working in the field for about 5 years now. And what started off as a professional thing became a bit of a game changer for me, because like so many people out there, you know, I didn't really think about my mental health. Every time I struggled, I just kicked myself back up, you know, because we just got to crack on, right? But unfortunately, that stress became burnout, that burnout became something else. And I ended up with my own diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and binge eating disorder. And I just felt like, do you know what? If it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's like the drip drip effects. And that is the drip drip effect that we've been experiencing, you know, in the pandemic. I don't think you need me to tell you that. You've obviously lived it every day this year. So who are Mind? Well, we're a mental health charity, and our only end game in life is literally not to give up until everyone experiencing a mental health problem gets both support and respect. You know, everything that we do, we hope leads us to this end game. So even coming and speaking to you, we're hoping that this will help you to address all the mental health needs that you might have, whether it's related to you, whether it's related to your colleagues, or even friends or family. Now, I don't know what comes to your mind when you say, if I was to say mental health to you, but what tends to come to people's mind is things like depression, anxiety, but actually mental health is just a state of being. Like you have physical health, you have mental health. So sometimes you might feel on top of the world, everything's great, you feel on point, focused, concentrated. And then other times you're like looking at an email and it's just not making sense. And then you're taking like, just because you feel so overwhelmed or just feel a little bit spaced out and it's not making sense. And then the next day you might have had a really good night's sleep and actually, oh my goodness, it's a PPI email, and you instantly delete it. So, you know, like you have a physical headache, you can have those kind of like mental health headaches, because mental health, like physical health, exists on a spectrum. But one of the things that I want to address is, we've talked about mental health, you know, Heather's talked about the impact of returning to work, what that looks like, the uncertainty of the whole lockdown situation, etc. And actually the invitation is, you know, for us to be talking more. But before we start talking more, before you start talking more within your organizations, the thing that we need to acknowledge is the stigma around mental health, because that is the difference between someone feeling safe enough to talk about their mental health or not, as the case may be. And if they don't feel safe, they won't. So, you know, we've at Mind, we tend to evaluate a lot, we tend to do a lot of research. And this is stigma stats. So basically from, you know, thousands of surveys that we sent out, you know, the responses that we had was that 88% said that when they shared that they were struggling with their mental health, they didn't feel supported, they felt discriminated against. Now that's a completely subjective stat because it is based on people's feelings, but that's how people felt, you know. So let's look at this in real life terms, right? Essentially, out of thousands of people that responded, like this was over like 3 to 4K people, you know, 9 out of 10 people said that when I struggled with this, you know, I didn't feel supported, I felt discriminated against. You know, that's quite shocking, isn't it? 60% said that stigma and discrimination are as damaging, if not more damaging, than the symptoms of their mental health problem. So again, real life context, right? Out of those thousands of people, essentially 6 out of 10 people said, it wasn't so much my illness, it was how other people reacted to me that was more damaging. Wasn't so much my illness, how other people reacted to me. And then 27% said that stigma had made them want to give up on life. So that's essentially 3 out of 10 people out of those thousands that responded that said, it wasn't so much my illness, it was how other people reacted to me that made me want to give up on life. And I just want to let that land a little bit. That's quite scary, isn't it? It's quite shocking when you think about it. It wasn't even the mental health illness, it was how other people reacted. And that's the thing about stigma. You know, we become unacceptable as soon as we become unwell with our mental health. So one of the first things that we would need to, like you would need to consider and address, is people feeling safe enough to say that actually coming back to work or the whole pandemic or anything else in between is causing them that anxiety, that they feel safe enough. Because then, you know, for them to feel like they have the choice to be able to say, do you know what, I don't feel okay, but I know that my employer is going to look out for me. I will be looked after, and I'm not going to be penalized for it. So that's what we're really working towards. So what does good mental health mean? Well, according to World Health Organization, it's defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. And, you know, simply put, it literally is that you look after yourself, your mental well-being, your physical well-being, which then allows you to kind of do what you want to do, to achieve what you want to achieve, and basically reach your potential. But if you have got so many stresses and things coming at you, and you're not looking after your mental health because you don't know how to, because you deprioritize yourself, because you minimize what you're experiencing, then actually you run the risk of not being able to achieve to your potential. Now, I want to debunk a bit of a myth, because I think people sometimes think that if you don't have a mental health problem, you must have good mental health. That's not strictly true. You know how you can become unwell with a physical health problem. So if someone had diabetes, if they're managing it, they might have a great life, despite the fact that this is what they have to do to manage their condition. And mental health problems are the same thing. You know, if you manage it and through treatment or medication, then actually you can enjoy some excellent, like, well-being levels, like really high positive well-being levels. So say, for example, if you look at this axis, right, on the top left, someone who manages their mental health problem, they are managing it, and that's fine, but also life is going great for them. You know, they have a strong family network, they have excellent friends, work is going really good, they feel like they've got purpose and value, and actually, you know, all coping skills, like even if something was to take a bit of a downturn, they've got the resilience to be able to bounce back. That gives them extremely high mental well-being, despite the fact that they're managing the mental health problem. That's a side thing. But equally, someone managing a mental health problem might also experience low well-being. That's a separate thing altogether, because remember that whilst the mental health problem itself is being managed, there's things going around, you know, in their life, like the pandemic, the lockdown, not having seen their friends forever. You know, these kind of things can impact on our mental well-being. And so people experience them, you know, but the only time that it becomes really stressful, where the low mental well-being can then trigger the mental health problem, is when people don't look after their well-being. So they're not doing those self-care things that make them feel better, make them feel like they're connected in any way, and just basically good for them, really. They stop doing that because they've prioritized other things over themselves. And that's when, you know, the low mental well-being can go into a place of, say, burnout, stress, and then can even trigger the mental health problem that they're managing. Likewise, on the flip side, you might have someone who's not managing a mental health problem, you know, they don't have a diagnosis, and again, life is going great for them. They've got the skills and the abilities to be able to bounce back if, you know, life took a bit of a downturn, and that's fine. But equally, if even though someone doesn't have a mental health problem, they can still experience really low levels of well-being. And this is where I suspect quite a lot of people that you would be working with will have that, you know, where are they in a space of needing a mental health diagnosis? Probably not, but they're experiencing low levels because they're feeling quite anxious about returning to work. You know, we've spent a whole year trying to learn this new way of working. There could be financial implications if people were furloughed or made redundant or whatever. And now, after a year later, we're told that we have to now learn how to work again. But it isn't going back to before. It's returning to work in a different way. Do we use a blended approach? Do we not use a blended approach? What's the best approach to use? What works better for people? You know, there's so many questions and so many uncertainties around, and that will totally have a negative impact. And don't forget that these are just some of the stresses. You know, life throws us so many curveballs, whether it's from our personal relationships, whether it's from our social connections, etc. So, you know, the work stuff is just one of the many stresses that we experience. So just something to think about, that you don't have to have a mental health problem to experience low mental well-being. And of course, the way to kind of look after your well-being, what we really need, it's very personal, but it can form into these 5 topics or pillars, if you like. So the first one is connect. That's something that people have really struggled with during the pandemic, because obviously we're used to seeing our friends, our family, getting that kind of support, and we've not been able to because of lockdown. And whilst Zoom and Teams and the like have been great, a lot of people have struggled with that because it doesn't feel the same. So whilst it's better than nothing, it's not really hitting that connection spot. So actually looking at ways to kind of bring that connection in, talking to other people. So if you were to have like a buddying group or just a meetup, as part of the return to work thing, and having a chat about what people are feeling and how people are feeling, then that's an opportunity to connect with one another. And it gives you a rich space to be able to support one another. It doesn't just land on you to support everybody. Everyone is able to do that. They can connect. Being active. So we know that exercise is really important, especially if you've been working from home and you've not been moving. And I must admit, I'm really guilty of that. Like days can go back and I'm like, I haven't even moved to go to the bathroom. Like I need to go to the bathroom just for exercise. So, it can happen to the best of us. And it doesn't have to be higher intensive, like big old, like whatever they're called that people pick up, weights. That's it. That's how much I hate them. It could be just something basic, like just moving around, just getting a sense of your body, listening to music, dancing around the cat or the dog or the plant or whatever. Could be anything, but just kind of having that. Being really mindful and taking notice. Like, have you ever just brushed your teeth and not thought about anything and just really felt the brush around your teeth? Really focusing on an activity, noticing, I don't know, if you live with someone, like noticing something different about them, the way their hair falls or the way the sun falls, having those small, like sort of little things where you're just literally focused can be really, really uplifting. So it's a very personal thing. Think of all those little things that you can do to uplift yourself. Learning is a really big thing. And I don't mean, like how we had in the first lockdown, like this productivity porn thing going on, where everyone's like, I learned 26 different languages. I'm like, why would you do that? Because you got Google Translate, man. So, that's just not realistic. But just learning little things, even if it seems insignificant to the whole world, can actually really put you in a really good frame of mind, because you've learned something new, you've mastered it. Like for me, I know this is going to sound really odd, but I changed my toilet seats because I just fancied it. And initially it scared me because of all these nuts and bolts and things, but I did it. And you know what? I'm now going to rewire my whole house. That's how positive it felt for me. Don't worry, I won't rewire my house. But the point I'm trying to make is that it felt great. And you can learn some really obscure things on YouTube. Why not? And then, of course, finally give. We feel good when we give and we know that we're making a difference to someone's life. But it doesn't have to be really big things if you haven't got the time for it, like doing a voluntary job or something like that. Sometimes just smiling at someone is giving. Sometimes just picking up the phone and not letting yourself talk you out of it. So how like sometimes you might pick up a friend and say, oh no, they might not want to hear from me, they're probably busy, is this an appropriate time to call, I should just text. Actually not talking yourself out of it and say, you know what, I'm going to call them. If they can't pick up, they won't pick up, and that'd be okay. And so actually just making that call just to kind of check in. Random acts of kindness, all sorts of little things that you can do that make you feel good, that you're giving without taking a whole load of effort, but the return on you is fabulous. So really think about all the things that you do, streamline them to these 5 things, and maybe even share them with your colleagues and they share theirs. And then that way you can have like a whole load of ideas and stuff to experiment about what works for you and what doesn't. The whole aim being that you're walking towards a better well-being. It's not going to be instantaneous. I don't expect that suddenly knowing this is going to change your life, but actually just knowing that these things do benefit us, you're walking towards better well-being. So the current picture is, of course, pandemic, COVID-19. Let's face it, the outbreak cuts across all all areas of well-being, you know, whether it's physical. I don't know if you've heard, but people are still feeling the impact of COVID. I think it's called long COVID. So they've had the infection and they felt that they've sort of overcome it, but actually they're still feeling certain symptoms like the fatigue, suddenly feeling like muscle aches and things like that. And because we don't really know too much about it, like we're still learning the impact on it on a longer term, you know, people are talking about it and actually being mindful of the fact that someone who is now, you know, overcame COVID can still experience long COVID. It is quite key. The mental, the impact on our mental health, you know, everyone's spoken about it, the lockdown, the not being able to connect, the same old, you know, having very little stimulating activities or having very little, you know, purpose. You know, if you go out, going to the post office seems like such a big thing. That takes its toll. You know, obviously our social lives, and then sadly financial as well. The amount of people that have had to be furloughed, the amount of people that have lost their jobs, the amount of people that have just struggled or experienced pay cuts or have to take lower paying roles for whatever reason. You know, it's been huge. And it's like everything's been kind of coming up at us. So the impact on individuals, I mean, the fact is that, you know, for some it's been positive, for some not so positive. For many, it's been a bit of both, you know. It's the same storm, but we're all in different sized boats. And that's the thing to kind of acknowledge. Just because you might have had a really positive experience doesn't necessarily mean that your colleague would, and vice versa. And of course, the impact on the mental health. So, you know, the anxiety around the health, the uncertainty, like we know that we're coming out of lockdown, but what if infection rates rise? So there isn't that. You know, the vaccination, do you get it? Do you not get it? When are you going to get it? The isolation, okay, lockdown's coming to an end, but is it still really healthy for us to go out? So having those kind of anxieties, limiting to access the things that keep us well, like just simple things like going to the cinema, or bereavement or trauma that you might have experienced, losing people during the pandemic. So a huge impact. And the headlines that we've had are that 60% of adults and 68% of young people have said that their mental health got worse during lockdown. That's really not that surprising, to be fair. We also heard from all the surveys that we've done is that parents and people from Black and minority ethnic groups felt that they were more affected by concerns about work. Again, not that sort of unsurprising really, because parents doing the homeschooling thing, and even though schools have opened up, how much have they really opened up? And of course, you know, people from Black and minority ethnic groups who know that infection rates are higher within the group, and actually what the impact or the safety around that is, and actually have they got that? And of course, all the things around the vaccination and that community too. So lots of worry there. And then women felt that they were disproportionately affected by coronavirus restrictions. So if you think about the fact that homeschooling might land on them, managing the work-life balance, so managing work, but also the home, not having access to support or family members that they normally might have done, you know, would have that big impact. People often minimizing what's going on for them, so they don't seek help when they actually should. And you get this, like, well, at least you've got your job, so you're okay. Like, what have you got to be worried about? And it's these kind of comments that make me think, well, I should be grateful, shouldn't I? Like, I am experiencing this, but actually that's nothing compared to, you know, this person experiencing it. So minimizing that and not getting the help. And this is really sad, because what could have been early intervention becomes crisis point, where people don't have a choice but to get help. So it's really important that when you return to work, if people are experiencing things, don't let them minimize it, but equally don't minimize it for yourself either. People drinking alcohol or eating too much, too little. So how many memes have we seen where people are like, this is my coping mechanism, there's a whole big wine bottle going down their gob, or they're just eating cakes and stuff, and it's become a bit of a joke. But aside that, the reality is that the dependency on alcohol and eating too much or eating too little, so food addictions, is on the rise. And it's because our coping mechanisms that we might have had pre-pandemic have been stripped off. Those are not accessible. Those are the ones that where we connect with family members, where we are doing physical exercises with people, etc. You know, all those kind of well-being things are taken off. And so what choice do we have? So we fall on the ones that are closest at home, and they tend to be food and drink. So really thinking about the impact on people there. And of course, we know that young people in education have been massively negatively affected. First of all, they have like developing those negative coping strategies, but also struggling to access support. And it's not just support around their mental health in response to the pandemic, it's the effect it's having on their studies, their exams and things like that, and therefore their future, essentially. So quite a large impact that we have experienced. And so, like Heather was saying, actually, what are the implications for you all? I suppose the main one is returning to work, the practicalities and the anxieties of it all. I think there is a certain fatigue and demotivation going around people. It's not the same one where you can just put an away day on and then everyone's feeling motivated with the company policy or whatever. This is a really weird sort of demotivation because it's come from a fatigue, like you feel psychologically tired, and you can't really change that. Actually, sometimes all you can do is sit with it and then go through it. And over time, as long as you're doing the little things as frequently as possible to look after yourself, you can work your way through it. So understanding that you know, you can't ask someone to just suddenly feel motivated, that they might be just feeling demotivated. You might feel demotivated, and accepting that this is just a side effect of the pandemic, and at some point it will pass, as long as we continue to look after ourselves. The fast-paced, intense working days for some of you, not having that work-life balance, so you're constantly at a laptop. You started at 9 a.m, it's now like 9 p.m. How did that happen? You know, and not having those breaks in between. So working those long hours, you know, great for 1 or 2 days, you might feel massively productive, but they will take their toll. And then, of course, we can't forget the fact that, well, how are we going to be returning to work? Is it going to be, right now it's going to be agile, but actually in a couple of years it's going to be like a big no-no and everyone's back in the office and it's back to, you know, commuting or whatever? You know, what does that look like? No one knows, and that uncertainty in itself can have implications on how people plan their lives. So again, something to think about. And the potential triggers for poor mental health, well, feeling or being under pressure. And it's not just work-related pressure. You know, pressure is linked to all the responsibilities that we have. And what the pandemic has seen is the increase of those responsibilities. You know, like I said, the work life, the money, there's all these basic things, everyday living things. It's not something massive or something completely different. It's those living things. That pressure is just so much more higher. And actually, if you're not able to de-stress or depressurize, if you like, then that could trigger poor mental health. Facing really big changes. This is where, again, people tend to minimize, because if the big changes are positive things like getting married or buying a house, or, you know, all sorts of those big things that are meant to be exciting, like a new job, yes, they are exciting, but they can also be very overwhelming. So it's really important, again, to understand that it's not about what you're doing or what the event is or whether it's exciting or not, or positive or not. It's the impact of that big event on you and on your colleagues, you know, and how is it affecting? And remember, they don't tend to come in isolation. Like, stressors will come at you, and sometimes, you know, you have like one stress on its own might be really manageable, but imagine you had loads and loads of them. Like, one little rock, easy to hold, but if you had to hold a whole bag, that's really heavy. That could be a potential trigger for mental health. So of course, life events, bereavement, loss, like we've mentioned, relationships affected. If you experience long-term stress anyway, and that's what you're prone to, then this would have completely taken you to an extra level that could potentially trigger mental health, poor mental health. You know, not having much control, the uncertainty, being overwhelmed by the increasing responsibilities. Actually, there's also the flip side, that what if you don't have enough responsibilities? What if there isn't enough work? What if there isn't enough stimulating activities going on in your life? Having too little can be just as impactful in terms of triggering poor mental health. It's about having the right balance, not too much, not too little. And then, of course, the isolation thing, which is the most biggest thing that has been created because of the pandemic. And so I want to introduce you to the notion of the stress bucket. Now, this is a tool, and I will explain how it works. And my invitation to you is to actually go away and utilize this tool and see what you come up with. And if it works for you, share the tool with your colleagues. These slides will be sent in PDF format. So I'll pass them on to Heather and she can cascade them to you all. But basically, and I'll just explain the stress bucket, it's a very simple tool. The bucket is you, okay? And everything that you can see in the bucket, so all the red filling up, these are all the stressors from your life, from every angle. Now, the point is that the more space you have in your bucket, right, the more able you are to make better choices, and the more able you are to better manage emotions. So you want that bucket as empty as possible, but that's impossible because you're always going to have stressors coming in. So you'll notice at the top, you could be stressors like, say, for example, if you're already prone to anxiety, say, for example, if your health is not, your physical health isn't that great, say, for example, if you struggle to maintain self-control, or any other, ways that your personality is, or, you are. And then, of course, you've got the life stressors. So, for example, the workload, it could be illness of others. What if you had negative feedback from your own boss, conflict between friends and family, or even neighbors or whatever, the uncertainty, the interruptions, the deadlines, the money worries and others letting you down, and conflicting priorities and lack of sleep. The list can go on and on and on. And my invitation to you is, when you take this tool, think about all the stressors that are in your life. Now, there is no such thing as I'm not going to say here, like, get rid of all your stresses, because when you get rid of one stressor, another stressor will kind of jump on. But the one way you can make sure there is space in your bucket is, you'll notice that there is a tap, and that is your tool to release stress. So all the tools that you have access to, okay, and they need to be simple, habitual things, which we will talk about in a bit. But those tools will help you to relieve your pressure. So you turn the tap on, you turn the tool on, and obviously that lets out the stress. You get to de-stress, which means your bucket empties out, which means that you have now got the space to make better choices and to better manage your emotions. And you'll notice in the bubble, it says frequency beats intensity. We have a habit of just letting our buckets fill until we get to breakdown. Then we do something massive to kind of reduce that breakdown down and reduce that pressure and stress. And then we carry on filling the bucket again, not really taking advantage of those tools that we know work for us. So it's not meant to be an intense thing. It's better if we opened up that tap frequently. So rather than going for a 10K run once a month, it's better to just go for a 10-minute walk every day. Do you see what I mean? So it's frequency beats intensity. And so the tool works is, you write down all the things that are stressing you out, that essentially are going into your bucket. And then on the other side, you will write down all the little things that you like doing that actually de-stress you out. It could be a walk in the park. It could be sniffing your cat. It could be going out with your friends. It could be connecting with your work colleagues. It could be just reading. It could be a whole number of those simple things, and they're personal. I enjoy a whole load of stuff that might be your idea of a nightmare, and vice versa. Pick those personal things out, put them down on paper so you know what they look like, and then hand on heart, ask yourself, have you actually been doing any of them, or has life been getting in the way? Have you been doing any of them, or have you deprioritized yourself and prioritized other people? Therefore, this stuff had to go. Because if that is happening, then my invitation to you is that there is a reason why your bucket is filling, and you have to make the choice. Do you let that bucket that is you fill up so you struggle to make better choices, so you struggle to better manage emotions? Or do you make the choice to turn that tap on, do what feels good for you? And I'm not saying it's going to instantly change your life or experience, but it will just give you that little bit of energy to be able to crack on. and make those better choices or better manage emotions. So that's a stress bucket. Do try it out. If it works for you, then please cascade. And so moving on, in terms of spotting signs, oops, moved on a little bit fast. I'm not sure why my slides are going like that, but hopefully it will come. There we go. No. So this is quite stressful, but there you go. So conditions at work, spot the signs. You know, the reason why I've put this here is because whilst there's a whole menu of mental health conditions, the ones that affect people in the workplace, and that is 1 in 6, tends to be depression, anxiety, and stress. And whilst, you know, it's really hard to kind of spot these signs sometimes, it's important that you get to know the people that you work with, get to know what they're like, what their personality is like, what their base level is like, so that if they suddenly appeared different to how they normally are and they don't seem their selves, then you can kind of check in and say, hey, how are you doing? I've just noticed that you don't seem yourself today. Is everything okay? In terms of work outputs, you know that, you know, once you get to know people properly, you know the kind of work outputs they do, their style of working. You know, some people tend to be like machines, and some people tend to be quite sort of relaxed, more creative, etc. And once you get to know that, if you then suddenly notice there's inconsistency, that's your checking point. You don't seem your usual self. It seems to be, you know, you don't seem to be focused or whatever. You know, is everything okay? Just checking in, are you okay? If people struggle to make decisions, it's usually an indicator. Fluctuating moods, so going up and down, again, if they don't appear to be their usual selves, ask them. Appearing tired, anxious, or withdrawn is a bit of a chicken and egg, because if people don't get sleep, and that can happen if you've got a little one who, let's face it, babies just don't sleep, do they? And night after night, you're not having that quality sleep, then it will have a massive impact on you and take you to that level of burnout. But equally, if you're struggling with poor mental health, then sleep is also one of the first to go. So if someone appears super tired or quite anxious because, you know, they've not been able to have quality sleep, check in what's going on with them. Do they need to work differently? Do their hours need to be changed a little bit, just so that they can be supported to do their work, but also have some quality of life, if you like. And finally, you know, it's the action point of difficulty in making decisions if people struggle to focus on tasks. So these are all ins for you to kind of say, do you know what, you don't seem your usual self. Are you okay? Are you actually okay? And ask twice. How many times do people say, are you okay? And you're like, yeah, I'm fine. Because we see it as a hello. It's not a hello. Ask twice so they know that you're genuinely asking, are you okay? I really want to know because I really want to help. So some of the supportive conversations that you can have, the questions you can ask are, how are you doing at the moment? You seem a bit down, upset, frustrated. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help? What would you like to happen? How have you spoken to anyone? Notice that none of these questions are you making any assumptions that there is any judgment involved. The questions are completely focused on that person, and you want to know what's going on for them so that you can work with them to come up with a solution or something, giving them a chance to speak about what's going on for them and truly empathizing. So when you see the other side with our suggestions of what not to say, you know, you're clearly struggling, what's going on? What do you expect me to do about it? Well, everyone else is in the same boat and they're okay, so why aren't you? You know, as you can see, the judgment in the voice, like you're not even giving them the chance. So really important that when you are having supportive conversations, they are supportive because you are giving them the space, you're curious about what's going on for them, for them to be able to talk, to help you, to support them, if you like. So just again, something to think about. Now, you've all got teams, obviously, so how to cope as a team. Wellbeing needs to be priority. It doesn't have to be really big, it doesn't have to be really sexy, but it has to be a priority. So as a line manager or someone managing the team, think about people's individual circumstances. Again, get to know them, get to know what's going on for them. But equally, see if you can foster like sort of a caring environment. So have a debrief, like a meeting or a debrief, and start those meetings off with, you know, a temperature check. today I feel 2 out of 10, today I feel 10 out of 10, today I feel 6 out of 10, you know, and the person who's had 2 out of 10, you can kind of check in. Okay, sorry to hear that you've got 2 out of 10, like you feel 2 out of 10, but is there anything that we can do to help you? And what it does is, it's not just your responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility in the team to look out for one another. Sure, the first few times are going to feel like, whoa, that's weird. And do I share? Because remember the safety thing. But afterwards, it will become habitual if you consistently start meetings with a temperature check. Very small, doesn't take a lot of effort, but can really make a difference. Clarity. So be clear about your priorities and policies. You know, sometimes these processes can be so convoluted. Like even the return to work process and reasonable adjustments and stuff can be really convoluted. So see if you can bring clarity to that for your people. Community, regular updates, make sure there's a two-way dialogue. You know that people are connecting, people are able to feedback. And then of course, reflect, take stock. This is a completely new situation for us. No one knows the right answer, no one. So take stock, reflect what works for you as individuals, what works for you as a team, give each other feedback, and then figure out what works for you as an organization. Basically, part of the returning to work is figuring out what works for you as an organization on those 3 different levels. So again, something to think about. And top tips for managers, lead by example. I mean, the amount of times where I've seen line managers say, I would want my teams to look after themselves. And my question would be, but how do you look after yourself? Do you look after yourself? And then it comes out that they will always deprioritize. Again, I've said this, I feel like a broken record. They will always deprioritize to prioritize other people. The thing is, though, is that line managers are just line managers. They tend to be role models or framework for that role model. So if people see that you don't look after yourself, they will feel that the expectation is that they can't look after themselves. If you explicitly look after yourself, then they will take that as permission that they too can look after themselves. Because if it's okay for you, it must be okay for me. Wellness action plans are a free tool by Mind. And they're literally just a set of questions where you get to find out what someone's trigger is, what that might look like, what can you as a manager do to help them, but also what can they do themselves to support themselves. And it's just a great action plan that you can utilize in a one-to-one. And talking of one-to-ones, check in with your colleagues regularly and teams frequently. And like I said, use those temperature checks. Review ways of working. So this is, again, learning. Does it work for you? Does it not? So constantly review if it does or not. Take that feedback. Encourage the work-life balance, and also look at all the tools available to you. If you're in different areas, that might be very different. So, you know, support tools, like if you have employee assistance programs or access to programs like that. If you don't, what's out there in the community? So mental health at work, Mind info line, Mind website, and then whole other charities like Samaritans, Rethink Mental Illness. There's so much out there. So look at what's out there that you can utilize, and then obviously create moments for social connection. It isn't just about work. Sometimes it's a little bit about play. Sometimes sometimes it takes people laughing with one another, crying with one another to form that social connection, you know. And we are human. We are human. Yes, we are working within corporate frames, but we are human, and humans are messy. So acknowledging that and connecting with one another, and knowing that you don't have to always be okay, because it's okay not to be okay. You know what? You will have the best relationship with your teams. So, like I said, it's really important that you have to look after yourself. Otherwise, how do you expect people in your team to do so? So taking care of your own health, mental health. If you find yourself that you're feeling always on, maintain a routine and boundaries for that working day as much as possible. Create a structure that tells you this is work time, this is home time. And then once you shut that laptop, and maybe, I don't know, to close it off, you might, I don't know, go and look at the kitchen cupboard or something, or whatever it is that you choose, that tells you that this is the boundary that I've stopped working. Don't go back to work. Like, be really clear and strict with that. If you have system overload because you're having to take in so much from everything, you know, establish some rules. For example, if you're constantly getting emails through, that can be so overwhelming. So do you have like a way to manage that email traffic? Do you have a way of utilizing things like Teams, like the chat function? So your team members aren't just emailing you, or your colleagues aren't just emailing you. They might utilize that chat so they can just have a chat with you in real time. Burnout, it's really important. You also create a wellness action plan for yourself. Think about what that looks like. And if you have a manager, to kind of share that with them. And then regularly check in with yourself. Ask yourself, is this wellness action plan up to date? Does it have everything that I need if, for example, I was struggling? And then also factor in things like leave. It is not cool to not have leave and have 30 days, at the end of the financial year. It's really important that you take that leave so that you're looking after yourself. Scheduling catch-ups with colleagues and family and friends if you're feeling isolated. We're coming to a close, so putting that in the diary for something to look forward to. If you feel overwhelmed, then focus on what is in your control, make a plan and seek support. Like I was saying with the action plans, you can get them. This is like the longest link in the world, but that's because, like I said, the PDFs are going to go out to you. So just in case the link doesn't work, you know exactly where to go. But it's a completely free resource. I will really encourage you to utilize it in your one-to-ones, but also do one for yourself. And then other useful tools, you can develop your own self-coping strategies, and they're really basic. They don't have to be big. Like if you're feeling angry, do something to calm yourself. If you're feeling really low, do something to energize. And it doesn't have to be something really big. Just, I don't know, going for a 5-minute walk might help. If you're feeling anxious, those are things that sometimes you can't actually control. So put them on paper, and then, can I control this? Can I not? How much is it really going to, try to put that logical spin on it, because sometimes anxiety just takes us over that logical point. Put it on paper so you can see it for what it is. And then if you're anything like me, I tend to go over and over something and overanalyze it, then actually what you might want to do is switch your focus. And this is where mindfulness, meditation, or breathing techniques really help, something that you can focus on. And what I've done is I've actually given you 2. So if you're the type of person that you're overwhelmed by everything that's happening around you in the outside world, then just take a time to focus on your breathing, and literally takes you 90 seconds, and do a scan. So as you're breathing, do a scan from head to toes and vice versa. And then also do a scan of what you're thinking, not engage with your thoughts, but just thinking. And you're just breathing. That's all it is. And then what you'll do is you'll notice which parts of your body feel stressed. Like, for example, if you have tense muscles, or if your stomach feels a bit weird, or if you've got shallow breathing. Again, if you're scanning your mood, you might feel like you see these racing thoughts, or you feel quite irritable, or suddenly feel frustration coming up. But at least you now know where you're at. This works great if you've got loads of things happening on the outside. Only 90 seconds. And the amount of times people say that they feel relaxed after it is amazing. But equally, if, for example, the chaos is actually inside you, not outside of you, and like you just feel really overwhelmed, you've been ruminating, going round and round, then take your focus outside of you. So where the other one was, you're focused on your breathing. This one is, even though you're breathing, you're focused on maybe a shape somewhere in your room. We suggest square, there's no real reason for it, but basically clockwise, just following the line of it. 90 seconds, that's a minute and a half. It's really nothing, but honestly, it just helps to kind of calm down. And these are tools that people use when they feel depressed or feel extremely anxious. So my invitation to you is, when you get the slides, do have a try of it. And then finally, use this checklist if you can, because it's sometimes, until you make it habitual, it's important that we have a reminder, because I tend to forget if something is not in front of me, or if I don't work with lists. So take the time to think about the day and write down your thoughts. Acknowledge 3 things at least that were difficult, and then let them go. You could put it on a post-it and just chuck them out into the bin or whatever, but just make an act where you know that you're throwing it out. But also consider 3 things that went well. Now, the important thing isn't about what went well. It could be really basic things like, I found blueberry chocolate and it was the best thing ever. what you're really doing is you're retraining your mind to be positive, because technically our minds can be really negative because it's constantly looking for danger. That's how our brains operate. But you can retrain it to constantly look for the things that went well. And that way you change the narrative. So now your brain is constantly looking for positive things, and that can only mean a positive thing for you. Choose actions that literally signal the end of your shift or working day. Do not make it ambiguous. If I shut my laptop, that means end of day. If I shut this room door, that means end of day. If I go for my walk at 4:30, that means end of day. What is it? And then as soon as you've done that, switch your attention to home and focus on what's going on in your home, and try not to let one thing overlap the other. And then, of course, really consider, how will you take your home time to rest and recharge after you've dealt with all the responsibilities that you have in your home life, and really consider what those things would be. And then finally, if you are worried, write it down. Ask yourself, is there anything I can do about it? No, let it go. Change focus of attention. I know it's easier said than done, but it is a practice. A practice makes perfect thing. If you can do something about it, make a plan. Sooner the better. If you can't take action now, then let it go, and then come back to it and deal with it when the time is right, you know. And that's the way to kind of go forward and manage your worries. And then in terms of further support, you know, think of, if you have employee assistance programs, what do they offer? If you have the budget to invest in one, then I would definitely recommend it. It's not just counselling for your people. It's a whole load of legal queries, work-related, health, child-dependent care, you know, advice, information, practical, emotional support, like a whole menu. I could go on. It's really worth investing in. But if not, you can also go through these links, and there's a whole list of like organisations that provide that support that you can access for free or minimal. And like I said, the PDF version of these slides will be with you, as will the links. And so that brings me to the end. So just wanted to ask, any questions, folks?
Runa, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We have had quite a few questions come through, actually. So let me just grab them. Now, if we're not able to get to everyone's question, because I appreciate we've only got a few minutes, we will come back to you directly. And if anyone has any questions as well that they really, you know, it's burning, but you need to head off, please do pop me a quick email over, and I'll connect you with Runa and the Mind team as well, so we can come back to you. But Runa, somebody's asked, you were talking before about stigmas. So how do we encourage our teams to come to us with any issues they need support with? I think we've had a few questions along this tact. So is there any tips really on how to broach the subject to our teams?
Okay, I mean, first of all, if, for example, you notice that they don't seem their usual self, then you would obviously ask them if they're okay. And that's the first kind of encouragement. Yep. But in terms of stigma, what we're really looking to do is, and what you can do, is try to make it a safe environment. So for them to know that your door's always open. So when you're having those conversations, reassuring people that if they aren't feeling okay, that's absolutely okay, and that your doors are always open. You know, you're trying to create that safety. You know, advertising tools and support functions that you might have, you know, even maybe sharing about your experiences a little bit. And I'm not talking like overloading it, but just saying, look, sometimes I feel stressed, and this is how it is like for me. And that gives them permission that, well, if you're so open about it, I feel safe with you because we have that experience in common. So it's literally thinking about, how do I make it safe enough for members of my team to come to me?
That sounds brilliant. And you mentioned before the wellness action plans. I mean, would you recommend encouraging people's teams to fill one out, and that maybe being a way to open the door to those conversations as well?
Absolutely. I would encourage everyone to do a wellness action plan. So they do it for themselves, and then you utilize it in one-to-ones. But if you have the ability, or if people feel okay, they should never be forced to share it with one another, then you encourage people to look out for one another. We have done this in our team in the last place that I worked. And do you know what? It just makes a whole difference. Because, you know, when you can't see wood for trees, and you don't know that you're picking your hair out of your eyebrows because you feel so stressed and you've not realized, it takes your colleague to say, are you okay? Because I've noticed that, I know from your WAP that this is a sign of stress. You've been doing that. That gives them an opening to look after themselves. It's a myth that you can support yourself by yourself. You always need, I feel, another person to look out for you. Because like I said, mental health problems is like wood for trees when you are really struggling.
No, I think that's really important to remember, although it's often hard to remember at the time, isn't it? One of the questions that we had was somebody saying, I can't wait for things to get back to normal, but I felt really low the closer we get to lockdown easing. Is this normal?
I mean, to be fair, I think the word normal is quite debatable, because even if you went back to working exactly how you worked before, like 100% in the office or whatever, it's still not normal, because the impact of the pandemic will have long-term effects. You know, it hasn't caught up with you already, it might do, you know, because you've learned to live a certain way and created certain routines and habits and structures that you might not have even realized in the year. It's a long time to suddenly then not be able to do that, suddenly not be able to do those coping things that you put in place, can make it really, really different. So I think my issue here is with the word normal. It's not going to be, and it's about reviewing and constantly asking, does this feel right for us? Does this feel right for us? And working together and coming up with something that does.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And another question that we had as well about that kind of that transitional piece, I suppose, about people kind of returning to the workplace, is whether you had any recommendations really on key actions or approaches to encourage staff to talk about how they're feeling about, you know, about that process of returning to the workplace.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think don't let the process just happen and people kind of land on it. So if you have an opportunity to have phone call or meetings or conversations at least weeks before or days before or whatever time frame you have left, and kind of gauge where people are at and keep reviewing it up until that point of returning, then you will know that how people are doing, and maybe create those individual plans to help people kind of come back, because some people are rearing to go and some people are extremely hesitant. So one size doesn't fit all. So it can't be a thing of like everyone's going to come back on the 20th, or, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. So if you speak to every single person individually beforehand and plan and come up with a solution, it's the best way forward and can really change people's experiences.
Definitely. I mean, we've obviously, in terms of our role, we're speaking to lots of customers about coming back in at the moment, and it's really lovely to see that some of those conversations are taking place, and you think that's where it's going to be really successful in that transition, because they're taking everybody's feelings into account, and it's a conversation rather than a command, and you know, it makes for a really strong unified team. And we've just as well got a question with regards to, you mentioned meditation before as well as one of maybe a coping strategy. One of our questions has been about, you know, what's the best length of time to put aside if people are looking to explore that, you know, and I think as people's worlds and routine changes a little bit over the next few months, and you know, they're carving out those routines, is there a set time to your own kind of meditation and well-being practices that you'd recommend?
To be honest, meditation is a very personal thing. I often find that when we say meditation, people think of a guru going like, and who's got time for that? That's not even real life. If that suits for you, then great stuff. But actually, there doesn't have to be a set time frame. Even something, like I said, like 90 seconds of your time, just breathing. Literally, if you're just focused on an activity and you're breathing in and you're counting it out. So breathing into 1, breathing out to 2, and, you know, like counting it to 10 and starting again and just going with that. You know, one day it could be 2 minutes, one day it could be 10 minutes. It just depends on how you feel. But all of it, if you do something small, but every day, that's likely to have a bigger impact than doing, you know, 2 hours one day and then not looking at it, or doing it for like a year or whatever. And, you know, it's look at all the habitual activities that you do. Like I mentioned, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, you know, cooking. Just focus on that one activity. Just really direct your mind to that. That's meditation, because you're focused, you're in the flow, you're conscious of how you're feeling in your body, and that keeps you grounded. So try not to get too into the guru stuff. You don't need to. Meditation is just you being mindfulness and connecting to the present moment.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I guess as well, that's such an easy way to make it feel less daunting for one, so that you actually do it. And like you say, consistency, I think, is the real key thing with it. That's absolutely fantastic, Runa. Thank you so much. I took so much from that. And I think, I noticed things both in myself, in my friends, and my colleagues. And, it's given some real good practical advice as to how to support all of us really within that. So I really hope that everybody watching it enjoyed it as much as I did, and more than that, I hope you all found it really useful as well. As Runa mentioned, we'll be sending over the recording of the video, but also the slide deck and all of the resources mentioned. So if you do have any questions or following this, or if we didn't get the chance to answer yours, please do pop me a quick email. Obviously, it will be completely confidential, but we'll be able to connect you with Runa and the Mind team to follow up. Just another quick reminder, don't forget to check out bruntwood.co.uk/spark for our calendar of events. On the 27th of this month, we're also running one about wellbeing support in the workplace. So Runa mentioned before employee assistance programs. We've got a really great conversation about how do you put one in place that actually adds value and isn't just a tick box exercise for your team. So do sign up if you want to know more about that, and keep an eye out for the upcoming content. The events are all virtual for now, but I think, as we've talked about this period of transition, it won't be long until we're able to do this in person again soon. And I think that'll be really lovely to see you and connect with you all soon. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. And I hope the rest of your day goes really well. Thank you.
Take care, folks. Bye-bye.